Well, good evening. It's Thursday evening night again, and you are watching Economics Unbound. Welcome to it. As always, I'm not alone. I'm with my ever so gorgeous anchor, Nana. Hi, Nana.
Hello, Tans, and hello to our viewers. Tonight we're looking into the unbundling of Eskom. In his State of the Nation address earlier this year, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that the power utility would be unbundled into three entities responsible for generation, transmission, and distribution.
Yes, Nana, this move that has angered trade unions and apparently divided opinion within the ruling African National Congress is intended to break Eskom's monopoly and to foster a sense of healthy competition and accountability and governance.
Last month, when presenting the special paper for Eskom, Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan said the splitting of the power utility would result in the establishment of a separate transmission company. The company is expected to be a fully independent legal subsidiary of Eskom by 2021. The plan is that by March 2020, the transmission company would get its own board and CEO to drive the separation process.
Eskom cannot remain as it is. Energy is absolutely crucial to this economy and to the households in South Africa. And we have to have a reliable source of energy for South Africans, whether they are in business or in households or students who are studying for their exams, for example. Thirdly, we have to resolve the operational issues. At the same time, we need to shift towards the new business model and create the transmission entity and the generation clusters as we are talking about them, and resolve some of the cost issues within Eskom itself, whilst looking at the question of a new leadership within Eskom and a resolution to the debt issues, which my colleague, the Minister of Finance, will address as we go forward.
Now, yes, Nana, however, analysts say the splitting of Eskom will have no benefit to the South African economy. Well, we've come to weigh here whether that's true or not. They say this process will just be a waste of money and time. Are they too pessimistic?
Yes, Tans, even trade unions say that they've put their differences aside for the sake of the workers. The National Union of Mine Workers and National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa have been meeting to tackle this issue. They say the unbundling would not solve Eskom's aging infrastructure and spiraling debt.
Yes, Nana, they also fear that the plan to split Eskom would lead to it being privatized. They say the decision to unbundle the troubled power utility opens it up to be milked of millions through the independent power producers. Now, last month, NUM even threatened to cause more power cuts over the government's decision to forge ahead with a plan to split up Eskom. Now stay with us as we unpack this further with our esteemed panel of guests after this short break. Now, welcome back. I am now joined on the line by a guy called Mbulayeni Mbodi, who is NUMSA's National Secretary of the Shop Steward Council at Eskom. Now, Mbulayeni, good evening and welcome to the SABC. Mbulayeni, can you hear me?
Good evening to you and to the viewer.
Yes. Now, according to the roadmap, Eskom is to be broken up into a number of standalone companies. What is the take of your union and what is your view of the planned and mooted split up of Eskom?
Yes, we have heard about that, and we still couldn't believe that people are trying to redefine unbundling. According to us, unbundling has to do with the breaking down of the business into pieces just before selling. And we can hear occasionally people mentioning issues of public-private partnership and issues of equity partner. That in essence tells us that the problems that Eskom has are not going to be resolved, because the problems that Eskom has sales volumes declining, operational costs, escalating debt crisis, and borrowing levels that are excessive.
Now,
we don't find unbundling as a way of solving those problems.
Now, Mbulayeni, let's separate the process from the merits of the program to unbundle. Are you claiming that there was a lack of consultation, a dearth of consultation, where there should have been a great amount of consultation on this process?
We think this was taken very lightly. There was no consultation to talk about. By the way, you must understand that the consultation we're talking about is broadly with trade unions and also with civil society, because we do believe there is a term that many people don't mention called energy democracy, which is what the people themselves of this country need to take time to be consulted to decide what manner of energy mix do they want, what manner of ownership of that energy mix. All that need not be done lightly. And we do believe that there's been no consultation to talk about.
So you're saying that there was a lack of...
We are hearing about this in bits and pieces. There's nobody who has ever come up with a very solid line of consultation with regards to the issue that you're talking about.
So apart from the lack of consultation that you are alleging, what do you think of the document itself, which is a blueprint that sets out clearly how Eskom is to be divided up into different commercial entities, into different institutional beings, and then it is to be run completely differently from the Eskom that we know. What do you think of the document that was issued by the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan?
Let's talk about what we've heard the Minister say about transparency. By the way, when you talk of unbundling, there is a legal unbundling and there is operational unbundling. We know that operational unbundling has happened a long time ago. I mean, in Eskom, you are able to do a profit and loss statement for distribution, for generation and transmission. And when you say governance and when the minister says governance and when the minister says transparency, we don't understand what manner of transparency is being referred to here. Because financial accounting-wise, if the transparency is in the cost and how the business is run, that is, those cost centers are in the hands of NESA as it is. So I don't understand why, and we don't understand as NUMSA why unbundling becomes a solution toward transparency. With regards to...
Now, Eskom was corporatized in the early 2000s. And although vertically integrated, the units, generation, transmission, and distribution have been operating pretty much as separate but joined entities. Does it mean now that these are going to be completely different entities, some of which will be broken up further for privatization or to open up space for private players, especially in generation?
We believe that is basically what is being said here. Although people are giving us the term unbundling and defining it outside what the dictionary would say, out what the textbooks will say about unbundling, we know we're going to have escalated, when private capital, when capitalism comes in, when private capital comes in, the prices will shoot up. We are so much worried about the fact that we are part of the society. We are part of the poor and the working class. And when the prices escalate, they affect all of us. We wouldn't want a situation where a public company that was serving us is handed over to private hands whose main interest is profit and making sure that they get return on investment as soon as possible.
Now, Mr. Mbulayeni, you claim that you were not consulted and you don't agree. As we've run out of time, can you tell us very succinctly what are you going to do about it?
What we're going to do about it is there's quite a lot we're going to do. One, we have already prepared documents of our approach and coming up with alternatives. But besides, we believe we're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that this thing doesn't happen without us. It shouldn't be that people think that we're just solely talking of the shop floor. We are also in collaboration with civil movements, people who are aware that Eskom is owned by them. The Department of Public Enterprise and the government is just administering on their behalf.
That's where we'll have to leave it,
make sure that we join hands with other trade unions. We are going to make sure that also our federations, I'm including now SAFTU and COSATU and all others that want to be part of this. We want to mobilize to make sure that we interrupt this handover.
Now, that's where we have to leave this conversation for now. Thank you very much to Mulayeni Mbodi of NUMSA. Now, according to the Eskom roadmap, transmission will be a standalone company, as we've said before. The document says that this move will yield benefits for Eskom and the country and economy in general.
The document says a separate transmission company will boost investor confidence as independence is assured. This will enable security of supply through increased investment. It will foster accountability within the remainder of Eskom. It will allow South Africa increased flexibility to adjust the future trajectory of the industry. The steps to Eskom's unbundling will involve organizational design that suits the new mandate, allocating debt to where it can be best serviced and retired quickly, creating the transmission company as a legal entity under Eskom Holdings, re-establishing the trader. This is the entity in the transmission business that trades electricity in real time across the globe. Then lastly, creating a new trading system.
Now, I am joined on the line by the National Union of Mine Workers Energy Sector Coordinator, Paris Mashiko. Hi, Paris, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? And greetings to your listeners.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. What is your take as the National Union of Mine Workers, a union that is quite dominant at Eskom? What's your take on the unbundling, both the process and the substance of the issues?
I'm struggling to hear you well, but if you're saying about unbundling as proposed by government and this Prime Minister, Pravin Gordhan, will not solve the problems of Eskom. Unbundling will not reduce the debt. Unbundling will not deal with the declining sales volume. Unbundling will not deal with the problems that are associated with the power stations. It will not do anything at all.
Now, you say that unbundling will not reduce the debt. However, yes, bringing in foreign equity partners and local equity partners can alleviate the financial burden on our power utility somewhat, wouldn't you say?
I'm very much so. I'm not hearing you well. I don't know what's wrong with the line.
Is partial privatization of Eskom acceptable to you?
No, we are against any form of privatization. Privatization hasn't worked anywhere, and it will be very worse in a poor country like South Africa and Africa.
So what are you going to do about your disagreement with the Ministry of Public Enterprises on how our power utility needs to proceed?
We are saying that we want to remain with a vertically integrated power utility, that utility which is government owns. We are also saying that Eskom should own the coal mines that are currently cost-plus mines, which are technically owned by Eskom. We are saying those coal mines should go directly into a government mining company so that we can get better coal to protect and save our ailing power stations, which are having a problem with the quality of coal. At the same time, that company can also enter into the international market. That is our first proposal, and we believe it will work. We are also saying that Eskom should also enter the renewable energy space. It should not be a space that is meant only for private generators.
Now, since you disagree with government about how our power utility should be governed, how the consultation process should happen, as well as how it should be divided up, have you published an alternative policy proposal at all?
On the 23rd of August, we met with Eskom. They presented a turnaround strategy. We have agreed that we will have a 2-day meeting. We have prepared our response and we are ready to present to Eskom, which is a 15-paper document. Surprisingly, Praveen produced his own document, the roadmap. If you look and scrutinize the roadmap, the roadmap is about issues that are more political, but it is also about issues that are about managerial, which must be managed by the board and the CEO and the CFO. So what we are seeing happening here, Praveen is trying to run away from the processes of consultation, because in the consultation we will talk about alternatives. Our recognition agreement says when there is a problem must be put on the table. We discuss around the problem and look at all solutions that are available, not to come to us with a decision that has already been taken. We totally reject that. We don't believe that is consultation. It is co-option. We are being co-opted into a decision that is being made, and we are very much angry about that. I must also indicate that we have a few meetings with NUMSA. We will be escalating the meeting to the leadership level because we want to go all out with our members and fight this monster on behalf of South African and the African region, because poverty is very high in Africa, and we will not allow a situation where it will be private people who will come and milk our country.
Well, that's where we have to leave it for tonight with that discussion with Paris. Thank you very much to the NUM for joining us this evening. Now, as the country awaits the appointment of the new Eskom CEO to be announced, the power utility still warns of a constrained system. And it says by Wednesday, there could be breakdowns in transmission. And they say that load shedding still could be affected. This begs the question of how unbundling plans detailed in Eskom's special paper will be able to remedy the challenges faced by the power utility, especially providing security of supply.
Eskom's most important job is to provide an uninterrupted supply of electricity to support economic growth. But the power utility has been plagued by low liquidity, spiraling debt and aging infrastructure, among other challenges. Analysts say Eskom is partly to blame for South Africa's extremely weak economy. And to address this, in the beginning of the year, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that Eskom would be split into 3 separate entities: generation, transmission, and distribution. At the end of October, the Minister of Public Enterprises, Praveen Gordhan, released a special paper titled A Roadmap for Eskom in a Reformed Electricity Supply Industry. This paper gave a detailed explanation of how the utility would be unbundling. According to the paper, a majority of Eskom's power generation comes from coal-fired power stations. But the challenges with the generation capability is the backlog and poor maintenance, low reserve levels, insufficient and frequent use of substandard coal. This results in a constrained generating capacity. A separate generating unit means that generation will now become a separate subsidiary under Eskom. It will consist mainly of current power plant base, which will be separated into a number of feasible smaller generating units. The paper also assured that coal will remain an important part of the energy mix.
So a proposal that government will be exploring with Eskom is the creation, for example, of 3 clusters of the coal-powered plants that will come back to some of the other elements of generation. So let's say there are 5 or 4 power stations in each cluster. Each cluster will act as a business, and that business must produce power as cost effectively as possible so that you as consumers or businesses as consumers get the lowest possible price that is available.
The establishment of a new transmission entity will be the keystone in Eskom's reform. The new transmission entity will be wholly owned by Eskom Holdings. Its core functions will be to act as an unbiased electricity market broker to promote capital investment within the industry and to catalyze energy efficiency and cost sustainability. This entity will also balance electricity supply and demand in real time. Eskom accounts for about 40% of electricity distribution throughout the country, while municipalities account for the balance of 80%. The current distribution model and legislation have created numerous challenges. This includes different tariffs between Eskom and municipalities in the same municipal area. The new distribution model will be authorized to buy from the transmission entity, licensed municipal generators, and from small-scale residential and business generators. This, the paper says, will allow the separated distribution business to transparently manage a changing demand market more efficiently. The paper briefly touches on the recovery of outstanding fees, saying non-compliance with respect to electricity fees needs to be addressed and resolved. It says Eskom must demonstrate willingness to collect outstanding funds and include a campaign to improve the culture of payment at all levels. However, for these plans, the utility will need a stable head of the institution. Government has missed several deadlines to announce its preferred candidate for the group chief executive at Eskom. Some commentators say the delay in announcing the CEO position is another clear indication of the power struggle around Eskom. While the country waits for this appointment, in a written reply to the SABC, the Ministry of Public Enterprises says the announcement will be made once government approval processes have been finalized. Diabosito, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Meanwhile, the Tripartite Alliance says it has agreed on a candidate who will be the permanent CEO of the ailing power utility, Eskom. This follows a meeting which took place on Sunday and Monday. The meeting between the ANC, the SACP, that's the Communist Party, and the trade union COSATU focused on the economy, particularly the revitalization of state-owned enterprises.
We agreed that Eskom is too big an institution for us to actually be bogged down and wait a lot of time and becoming indecisive. So we have agreed on the candidate, and we hope that the relevant people will make a proper announcement, and then we can get on with the business of turning around the power utility.
So you can't tell us who that candidate is?
No, it will be a miss of me.
A stable Eskom would be able to allow our government to drive forward the development required. It will also be able to allow private sector investments to also flow into our own economy.
Now, to take this discussion further, I'm now joined in the studio by SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi and Chris Yelland, who is the Managing Director of EE Publishers and an energy expert. Welcome to the SABC.
Thank you for having us.
Now, this is quite a heated discussion nationally, and there are many vested interests. There's the interests of the workers and the trade unions themselves, and then the interests of the communities. Then there's the interest of the environmental groups and people representing various sections of civil society. And then there is our representative as the ordinary people of South Africa, the government. So how do we reconcile the different competing interests? Chris, let's go first. Let's have a discussion about that with you.
Look, ultimately, government has been elected by the people of South Africa, and it has a policy. That policy was written in 1998, and it clearly details the unbundling of Eskom. It was a result of a long consultation with the government partners. That means Labour, business, communities, and government itself, and resulted in a white paper, which is a formally approved policy document by government, approved by the cabinet. And so there is nothing new about the policy of unbundling of Eskom, the creation of an independent grid operator, the creation of a competitive, diversified generation sector, and the restructuring and a consolidation of a very fragmented electricity distribution industry into a number of regional electricity distributors. So what I'm saying is that this process that has taken place over the last 20 years has resulted now in a new roadmap, which is really nothing different to the official policy of the government of South Africa and its coalition partners.
Now, are you saying basically that the document that was developed in 1998 is still applicable and relevant, much as the energy market and industry has changed over the years? Are you saying that the consultation process that was embarked on way back then is still valid for the new social formations and different competing interests that exist even now?
What I'm saying
is it still updated, or do we need to
what I'm
move
saying
with the times?
is that government's partners, the coalition partners of the ruling party, have been partners since 1994 and have been party to the discussions and interactions over decades. And to claim that there has been no consultation, I think, is disingenuous.
But the claim isn't that they haven't been in an alliance in which they talk. The claim here is that in the production of the document on the table, which is the document under discussion here today, is that the process of producing this particular document was not sufficiently consultative.
Well, the way I see it is that what is in the current roadmap is no different from what the official policy has been for the last 2 decades. And I believe that the different constituents and partners of government have had every opportunity and indeed have engaged with their party, with the tripartite alliance and with government over these decades. And the results we've seen recently is really little different to what we've always had as the always official policy and only official policy of the government in respect of energy.
And clearly these partners and these allies of the ruling party continue to engage vigorously on paper, in discussions, and perhaps, as we've heard earlier, on the street.
Indeed.
To contest ideas.
Indeed.
Mr. Vavi, could you come in? What's your comment on what Chris and I have been conversing?
I'm not surprised that Chris is taking this line. Firstly, to present himself now as the spokesperson of the Tripartite Alliance.
That is not true.
I didn't interfere with you. He's now presenting himself as the spokesperson of the Tripartite Alliance.
No, that's not fair.
I've never
for
said
the
that.
past 20 years.
Not true.
Can I continue to make my point? In 1998, the year he claims that the alliance was consulted, I was the Deputy General Secretary of COSATU, as you know, and I became the General Secretary in 1999. And I was sitting in all of the structures up to the level of the National Office Bearer with the alliance formations to discuss a variety of issues. Not once in all of those discussions did the issue of unbundling of Eskom ever come to be presented by anyone in government and in the ANC. So it is just completely not true that there was some 20-year period of consultation in which the parties to that alliance were quite aware of the government policy in relation to this question.
Okay, so there are claims.
So it's just not true. We only left that alliance when we were dismissed
Yes.
for standing up against neoliberalism in 2014, that's when NUMSA was dismissed, and 2015, that's when some of us were dismissed. Even in that period, at no stage was the issue ever discussed. That's the first point. The second point, you would have listened to the NUMSA and NUM representatives now saying we presented a turnaround strategy which we were expected to be engaged on by Eskom and by government. That didn't happen. Instead, a big brother from the Department of Public Enterprises, the Minister Pravin Gordhan, imposes his own roadmap without any discussion, no consultation, completely sidelining a process underway inside Eskom to find a workable solution to the crisis that Eskom is facing.
Mr. Vavi.
If you don't call that ultra arrogance
Mr.
and
Vavi,
unilateralism on the part of the government, then I don't know what is the meaning of that.
What we are here to do tonight is to talk about what exactly technically is being proposed, and we are also here to talk about solutions. The main aim of our discussion is not adversarial, but to build upon possible solutions by analyzing the paper itself and sharing with South Africans what exactly is proposed about to be done about their own power utility. So if we could focus on the solutions proposed in the paper, and if you could propose solutions to future consultation, it may be that we could find some meeting of minds.
Just before I land on that, can I just make another example about this unilateralism on the part of Pravin Gordhan and the DPA? In the SAA, in which the country will be plunged into some little bit of a crisis tomorrow, exactly the same thing happens. The unions engages the CEO, Vianney, and they find one another. Here's a turnaround strategy. We will not lose jobs. We will begin to make money for the government over a period of time. Apparently, government doesn't like that because the government has a fixated proposition that says they must bring in privatization, come blue, red, or white. So he is shown the door, he's forced to leave through basically non-support of the turnaround strategy. And before we know it, the government have its own plan, and the rest is history. Tomorrow, the workers at SAA are going to start embarking on a strike, which should have not happened, which should have been avoided if there was consultation. Now, coming to this question you are asking, the government present this thing, no discussion with the unions. We suspect not even a discussion with the Eskom board took place. No discussion.
Do you
with the
suspect
community.
that, or do you know that?
I think I know that. I know that because already we would have heard members of the Eskom board going to public platforms to say we are not being consulted. Instead, there is an active interference on the work we are supposed to be doing as the board by the powers that be.
What's the solution, Mr. Vavi?
The solution, we think that the first thing that we must do as the country is to check and to answer a very pertinent question. What happened? Why Eskom finds itself in a situation where it is suddenly selling to this country such a expensive electricity, having been increased by above 500% over a period of about 20 years now. Why is it in debt for 450 billion? If you don't answer those questions, what happened? Why are the coal companies have long-term contracts? Why are they being allowed to milk the public utility in the manner that even the Minister of Public Enterprises acknowledges that the rate of profits that they are making is just extraordinary?
So, Mr. Yellen, what do you think
unless
happened?
we can answer all of those questions, why all of a sudden we are selling less electricity to the country than we did before? What have happened to our industrial capacity, to our manufacturing sector. If you don't answer those questions, you will not know what to do about Eskom in the future.
Now,
and
I would
that's why
like
you're
to
going
give
to impose
Mr.
propositions
Yellen,
that cannot work.
I'd like to give Mr. Yellen just 2 minutes before we take a break and have a drink of water and then come back and debate what we all think of a just transition. What happened at Eskom? What went wrong?
Well, I think the questions that Zwelinzima poses are very valid. And I must say, I think they have been answered by Eskom, by the DPE, by the Department of Minerals and Energy, by the relevant ministers, by the President, by the Finance Minister. But I think people are closing their ears to what is being said.
What happened?
Well, we would need to go through each one of those questions. And it cannot be done succinctly. One needs to answer each one of those questions. So let us look, for example, at, let's just take one example, the debt. You asked the question, where did this 450 billion rand of debt come from? It's very simple where it came from. It came largely from Medupi and Kusili's construction, which has experienced massive cost and time overruns through poor contracting, poor management, labor problems on site over a decade, and this has resulted in a massively expensive program, resulting in 450 billion rand of debt. So that's just to answer your one question. That's one question.
Oh, I can see already that what happened is going to be contested. But we'll have to continue with what happened just after this short break. Please stay with us. Well, welcome back, and I am still joined in studio by SAFTU's General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi and Chris Yellen, who is the Managing Director of EE Publishing. And before the break, we were having a riveting discussion about the future of Eskom. Now, about what happened. You were about to challenge Chris as to your analysis about what happened.
No, I happen to agree with him. It goes to the center of our concern, the issue of corruption that he's speaking about. And that issue still weighs heavily on our conscience as we are now talking about the future.
So you're
because
saying
you know why we worried? He's talking billions of overrun and time overrun, not one executive in prison, not one person ever in court to say what happened, to answer that question. So we are now being asked to enter into another journey, get into the journey of the independent power producers, 27 agreements signed behind our backs. Nobody knew anything about them. They are all in multinational corporations. We have been given certain guarantees. And this is the point that I think we must highlight in this discussion. How many South Africans are aware that these independent power producers are being subsidized by Eskom?
Can you just tell our viewers who these people are?
There are 27 of them, and we see that their partners are related to the first family. Yet again, the same syndrome that makes us to be very worried about the past that is not properly addressed, and we are now asked to just say, accept international investors, there will be 56 billion rands that is coming into the economy and 20,000 jobs. Lies. We are seeing decommissioning of the old power plants that are going to lead to massive job losses in Mpumalanga, where people are not being even consulted. That's the first point. We don't know. The country doesn't know that as we speak, we are subsidizing these 27 power producers, all of them coming from overseas. The country doesn't know that all of their equipment for the renewables are ready-made, produced elsewhere in the world, coming into South Africa to help create jobs where they are being produced in a country where 58% of its youth is unemployed.
Mr. Yellen, come in. Are you
I think it's
disputing
important.
these facts?
I'd like to focus on areas where we agree with each other.
Yes.
And one area that we agree with each other is there has been a lack of accountability for the mistakes of Matupi and Kusili and corruption and mismanagement. I think we agree on that. The question is, what is the solution? And that's what hasn't been proposed yet. But I want to give you a solution.
Yes.
The best way of ensuring accountability is to increase the number of shareholders. At the moment, there is one shareholder represented by one shareholder representative, the Minister of Public Enterprises, and he is playing with taxpayers' money, not his own money. That is a recipe for lack of accountability.
But Mr. Vavi could easily say that it isn't the diversity of shareholders that makes the difference,
It is.
but it's the diversity of stakeholders that may make the difference.
Let me tell you, when you have got skin in the game, money invested, outside shareholders with money invested, then you get accountability.
Mr. Yennan, what
in a much better way.
A community has got more than skin in the game. If you had a multi-stakeholder board for Eskom, if you had a different governance structure, we wouldn't be talking about a lack of consultation because those communities would be represented in the board rather directly. We wouldn't be talking about...
Why isn't the PIC, who represent the pensioners and the workers of Eskom, why is it not represented on the board?
And
I believe it should be not only on the board, but they should be shareholders. The PIC should not just be a lender of money. It should be a shareholder that can participate and watch its money carefully. At the moment, it's a lender and it's not able to watch its money properly.
There seems, Mr. Vavi, to be something wrong governance-wise, something systemic, and that you need to find a governance model that accommodates all the stakeholders in the energy thing in order to achieve what the other contributor said was energy democracy, bringing it into the utility of the future. And that would then ruggedize and erase the issues of insufficient communication, insufficient consultation, because those particular stakeholders would be directly represented. And money is not the only skin in the game. It's livelihoods, it's jobs, it's futures, it's the environment. Mr. Vavi, what do you say?
This government, led by the ANC, adopted the Freedom Charter in 1955 that wrote a preamble that says the people shall govern. The people shall govern. But unfortunately, it is not the people that are governing. Not even workers employed by Eskom are being consulted. Worst of all, the communities in Mpumalanga who stand to either benefit or suffer from any process government is happening. The government is actively trying to shave our heads in our absence. The unilateralism, the arrogance that we were speaking about. So let's come back to the point that I think is a point of departure. We in NUMSA, NUM, SAFTU, and a host of other progressive forces in our country believe in a fundamental belief that says energy, like oxygen, water, public education, healthcare, security, the army, the municipal services
are a public good.
Are the public good that must be produced by a utility of the state in order to perform certain developmental challenges or certain human development challenges. That's our point of departure.
There you
now,
differ
this
fundamentally.
Road, that's where we differ fundamentally.
I want to tell you where I agree with you.
Where we differ fundamentally.
I want to tell you where I agree.
Where do you agree with him?
I agree that the answer is not privatization.
Which is what is happening now.
What is the
I
answer?
believe the answer is to increase the public participation in the business of Eskom and electricity. The public participation, I am a strong believer in energy democracy. And the way to improve energy democracy is to involve the public in the business, not the Minister of Public Enterprises, one person, a real democratization.
Now, I can see you two leaning into each other. I'm almost tempted to lean into you. I want to know what a just transition is. I've asked this question three times on this show, and it seems that there are differing perceptions of what a just transition means. Mr. Vavi, you're likely to say that you believe in a just transition to a desired shared future, and Chris believes in it too, and so does the president, but you're at odds. How do you define it?
Just transition is consultation. Just transition is about involving of the affected parties into development of a plan. Just transition is about sitting down with workers and communities to say we have made a commitment to the international communities that we are bringing down our reliance on coal power and that we are going to be bringing in renewables. And therefore, how are we going to do it in a manner that is going to be sensitive to our developmental challenges, in particular to the crisis of unemployment, to the crisis of underdevelopment in Mpumalanga and elsewhere in the country. Just transition is about then saying to everybody, let's work together. We've already missed it. There's no just transition in South Africa when there's unilateral actions by one department.
He's saying already, Mr. Vavi is saying already, that elites have a scheme and that this will be another elite transition. What are you saying?
Again, I want to emphasize the areas where we agree. One thing I can say for sure, there is going to be an energy transition in South Africa, whether we like it or not.
Is it going to be a difficult transition?
The question is whether it is going to be a just transition. There is going to be a transition, but it is not certain that it is going to be a just transition unless we walk this path together. All the stakeholders in the sector, including labor, including communities, including business, which you haven't mentioned, and including government, we have to walk this road together, because if we don't, there will be deep wounds in the side of South Africa's society that will haunt us for decades.
And currently, our wound is Eskom.
We need to address what is going to happen with these old stranded communities in the Mpumalanga coal fields, in the Northwest Platinum fields, in the Free State gold fields, where there are towns that are dying. We need to look at reindustrializing these to cope with the new green economy, and we need to do this together. And there are such opportunities to walk this path together and to make sure that there's not just a transition that leaves wounds in our side, but a just transition which builds communities and builds on their strengths.
If you're on the same page on that, why did you initially, when we came into the studio, defend the consultation process as advocate?
I'm not defending it. I'm stating it as a fact. I'm not defending it.
I told you, as a player inside that alliance, there is no such facts that you are putting on the table.
Well, I can say that the government white paper on energy policy, which is the only energy policy that South Africa has. By the way, this roadmap of Mr. Pravin Gordhan's is not an energy policy or an Eskom policy. It's not even a white paper. It hasn't been adopted by the cabinet yet. It is still being negotiated with Labour.
Well, it looks like we will never end this discussion tonight, and that's where we have to leave it for tonight until next week, and until we return to these issues earnestly and discuss them with our communities. It is goodbye from Economics Unbound and the team and Nana and Judy Tseke. Good night. Cheerio.
Eskom, having recently been downgraded by ratings agency Moody's, remains the greatest threat to the country's economy. It looks like a solution to the struggling power utility is far off. It has been a decade since the country experienced the first incidents of load shedding, and it looks like it might just take another decade to find solutions for Eskom. This is where we leave it tonight. Good night.